here in London, I have 2 full sets of Throne of Glass plus the Throne of Glass book collector's edition.
That's 24 already.
And that's
That's one series.
All right. So why don't we turn our cameras on?
There you go.
Oh my God, Jenny, look at you. And look at your crowns. You guys look amazing.
Oh, and you're like an elven princess.
Yeah, honestly.
Everyone looks amazing. I can't see very well, so I'm getting really close because I haven't got my glasses on clearly underneath my mask.
I did think about taking mine off because it's like a princess, but like a bookish princess.
Yeah, ain't nothing wrong with that.
I've got my Casbreca t-shirt.
Wait, I didn't see it.
My Cas t-shirt.
Oh, I love it.
It's Abby.
Oh my
Love
God.
it.
Yes, I figured I would do like a comfy Feyre look. However, I also have Valkyrie.
Nice.
So
I love
to get warm, I'll do that. Oh, y'all look great. Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you.
This is really fun.
I used to wear my crown. I mean, I can't wear it in everyday life, so.
I can't believe you guys, like, honestly, like when we were chatting and planning this, you were all like, oh, we'll just wear our crowns. And I was like, oh my God, I don't have a crown. I need to get a crown. If I'm going to be a fully fledged fantasy fan,
Yes,
I need
I
to
have
get a
2
crown.
crowns. I have a
No, I'm
selection
like,
I can choose from.
Lost my crown. I don't know where I've put it.
I mean, the funny part is I only acquired my 3 crowns in the last year because this one I got for my birthday, and then I got this like one at a Renaissance fair, and it's got like antlers, so it was very Throne of Glass to me. And then
Or you got
this for Ursula when I was Ursula for Halloween.
Oh wow! But that's that's a very Terrasen crown, like 100%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now I put this in it, which was a gift.
Oh,
If you know, you know. No spoilers. But if you know, you know. But yeah, I'm just gonna put.
I got this last Christmas from my mom because I was like, I've been on Bookstagram a year and I don't have a crown yet. And I really need a crown. And she's like a big theater nerd. And so she was like, oh, I will get you a crown. Like, you need a crown. I also get you a costume. So I actually also have like a Ren Fair costume now. But I didn't wear it today because it's very wrinkled. And I realized it looks really bad because it was stuffed in a suitcase.
Oh my God.
For my 1-year Bookstagram anniversary, I'll get myself a crown.
Yes, of course.
Or we'll send you a crown. Yes, no, but I love what you did. That is gorgeous.
It's just a necklace. I was like, okay, what can I do instead of a crown? So I just necklaced it.
Well, that's so creative. I never would have thought of that. Now, is that from the Court of Silver Flames?
This was a promotional item when Court of Silver Flames came out. So I got sent it from Bloomsbury. They were like, hey, do you want to do a promotion for Court of Silver Flames? And I was like, why are you even asking me? How is that a question? Obviously, it's a yes. So I have a mask.
Dreams do come true. I mean, I remember when they did that campaign when the book was coming out, and it was like MAASK, like mask, and it was like a hashtag. And
cute.
It's so cute because we know like the cover of the book has the mask on it. And I had like a whole bunch of masks at my home in New York, and I just like took lots. I did like a little photo shoot with all of them. I have that somewhere on my Bookstagram.
I love it because it was deep in lockdown, so I ended up doing like big eye makeup that was inspired by the book and just went all out, which I haven't done today. But I was just like, yes, I have like nothing to do with my life because we're locked down and there's nothing else to do. So let's just
and I mean it could be worse, like doing dress up in masks for Sarah J. Maas release. But yeah, so I'm gonna pause recording. Hello, fellow readers. I'm Alexis, and welcome to the Tandem Collective YouTube channel. Today in this video, we're going to be talking all about fantasy, all kinds of fantasy. And I am so excited to have Tandem team members, Zuzanna, Julianna, and Jenny here with me. Yes, hello, to talk all about fantasy. They're wonderful fantasy experts, so I'm very excited. And as this is your first time on the Tandem YouTube channel, could you please introduce yourself and where you're located?
Hi, I'm Julianna, and I am coming to you from the US, North Carolina specifically.
Excellent. And where were you before that, Julianna?
I have been living in Africa for 13 years and just in November moved back to the US. So I was in South Africa and Kenya, and I joined the Tandem Collective team when I was still in South Africa in Cape Town, and I miss it a lot.
Jenny, how about you?
I'm Jenny. I'm from the UK, living in Cheltenham, which is not as exciting as South Africa or Kenya, I'm afraid.
Zuzanna, you're up.
Hi, yes, I'm Zuzanna, and I'm living in Warsaw, Poland right now. But yeah, I've been living here for about 4 years, but I've kind of moved around as well, lived in the UK for a while. So, but Warsaw is my current base.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, so we are a very global team, but one thing that unites the team is books, and one thing that unites the four of us is definitely fantasy books. So the first thing that I wanted to ask you all, because fantasy is such a broad term for the many different kinds of books and TV and film that there are out there. So I'm just going to put this list up on the screen for you. And I'd love you to share what your favorite fantasy subgenres are, if you can see that. Yeah, why don't we start with Zuzanna? What do you think from these?
I'm loving this map, by the way, this map of the fantasy universes.
Wow.
I think I would dip into all of them. But if I were to pick kind of my fallback favorites, I would definitely say high fantasy. I love an elaborate world building. Definitely, you know, Martha Wells, Brandon Sanderson, that kind of you know, level of detail. I do love that. Right now I'm kind of going through a dark academia phase. Just finished Hellbent by Lee Bardugo, which I completely adored, and Julianna and I kind of just gushed about this, have been gushing about it for the past 2 weeks. But yeah, I think the one that I might be the least a fan of is retellings, because I feel like unless you're really doing something, I mean, obviously there are retellings that I like for just for the quality of the writing, but in terms of kind of world building, they're the ones I'm probably the least interested in. But like I said, I'll read anything that's fantasy adjacent. You know, this isn't a criticism of the writers themselves, because obviously Song of Achilles was beautiful and I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough, honestly. Jenny, what about you out of these options?
So actually, I'm quite similar to Zuzanna. High fantasy, all day, every day. Give me a massive series with like 20 books that's like slow paced. I can really like get new world, love it. I also hate it because I start a series and I'm like, oh my God, I've got 20 books to read. But fantastic. I don't really read any paranormal fantasy, although I probably have. And I don't really read horror because I'm a complete scaredy cat and literally everything terrifies me. So I don't go out of my way to scare myself. I do sort of agree with Zuzanna on retellings as well. I love a lot of retellings, but one thing I've noticed is that we're getting the same story multiple times. And again, it's like it is with everything, you know. Hades and Persephone sold, so they've made another Hades and Persephone retelling and another one and another one. But we know the story, and every retelling is different, but we're still going to know the outcome. Same with like Medusa. And again, there's some fantastic Medusa retellings that I've absolutely loved. But there's probably 10, 20 Medusa retellings on the market at the moment. So with a retelling, I love a retelling that does something completely different. And I think that's quite hard to find at the moment. I think there's so many fantastic ones, but they are stories that we see quite often. we're not getting very many unique retellings coming through at the moment.
Yeah, makes sense. And if you are a fan of retellings, let us know by putting it in the comments if you have any recommendations of ones that we should try out as well. That, especially like Jenny said, that's something completely different with a well-known story. We love that. And Julianna, how about you?
Yes, well, I wanted to jump in and defend retellings because I love a retelling. Actually, I brought some, so I'm going to show some.
Oh my God, yes.
Because I do think you have a valid point in that we don't want spoilers. We don't want a story that's exactly the same. So I do like a retelling that really is a spin-off and brings fresh new things to it. But like Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik is a Rumpelstiltskin kind of retelling.
Zuzanna's got the same one.
Okay, of course there are exceptions. Like, of course there are exceptions. But that's because Naomi Novik is my ultimate all-time favorite writer. And I'm actually going to talk about her later.
Well, I won't talk about this one too much specifically. But like, if it's a well-done story, I love it. And I am a real big fan of like a dark, enchanted, magical forest that's almost personified, which I feel like you get in quite a few, another Naomi Novik one, Uprooted. You also get in For the Wolf and For the Throne by Hannah Witten that are technically like categorized as a retell. It's kind of a Little Red Riding Hood retelling, but it doesn't at all follow the fairy tale that you know. But I would put it in this category of retellings of like, it's a fairy tale inspired world, but the author does like really interesting things with the story, but still brings in like, there's this enchanted forest and there's the, these pieces that I think we all grew up loving about fairy tales because, and they're, generation after generation has enjoyed them because there are elements of it that like really appeal like universally to that, like make great stories. So I love it when you get like fun spin-offs of that, like Marissa Meyer's Lunar Chronicles, where she does like a retelling of fairy tales, but in space and sci-fi. So I really like that. And then you have like, I'm sure Jenny's going to talk about Sarah J. Maas later, but like even A Court of Thorns and Roses started off as a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I do think though that we often call things a retelling if it just has a little bit of the story. And that's what I like. I don't want one to be where I know what's going to happen. I want it to be something that takes the great parts of the story and then jumps off of that into like new things.
But that's exactly what I was saying before. Like, I mean, the Lunar Chronicles is the perfect example of something that's like so changed that you don't know what to expect. I mean, Cinder is sci-fi. She's a cyborg, for Christ's sake. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's a completely different. No, I mean, I think, Julianna, in essence, I would agree with you because all the examples of good retellings you raised are ones I love completely. But they have done something original. So they've brought an element of surprise and ingenuity that, takes it enough away from the original.
Yeah.
Engaging. I agree.
And I do think high fantasy for the win. I'm just going to chime in, agreeing with Zuzanna and Jenny about that. It is definitely the best. We come for the world building, the intricate magic systems that make sense, and you can like dive into these worlds that are totally different from ours, but then the characters are really the thing that keeps you there. So Brandon Sanderson is my favorite high fantasy author, and I read a quote from him where he said, for fantasy books, you come for the world building, but you stay for the characters. And that's really it, because we want a world that feels totally different than ours, but then people that are the same, and diving into like who these people are with and how they interact with each other in this different setting. But it's those relationships between the characters, it's the character development that like keeps you going back to these fantasy books.
No, completely agree. And there are elements of that in all of these subgenres, but I think high fantasy is often takes it to the max. I think I speak for all of us when I say that we've definitely read from all of these genres and like enjoy them. But of course, you always have your favorites. So thank you for sharing those with me. And I am going to stop sharing my screen. Here we go.
I had some other subgenres.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, yeah. What did I miss? Yes.
I felt like you didn't represent all of fantasy. Not a criticism.
Fair.
But I see that you don't have fantasy romance on here.
Well.
I just feel like that is a blooming category of where you often have like romance plot lines in some of these other ones, but there are a lot of books now that are being sold as fantasy romance. And I think that started with Sarah J. Maas probably, but you have like a lot of fantastic ones coming out now. I read The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy this past weekend by Megan Bannon. And it was this like wonderful, cute, sweet romance, like swoony romance story set in this fantasy world. And I think those sorts of books are really accessible to both like romance readers who have never read fantasy before, that like kind of gets them into fantasy, as well as for like fantasy readers. I loved the world building and like the silly characters and the extra, like all the extra fantasy bits. And then I talked with a friend of mine who isn't normally a fantasy reader, and she's like, oh, I loved the story. It took me a while to get used to the world, but I loved the characters and the romance. And so I think that's a really fun subgenre of.
And that is, I mean, romantasy, as it's now being called, is my favorite, because it's only recently, I think, started to be like sold that way. I've always thought of like any of these categories can also have romance in them and have like a big part of them. But actually, when I very first started a Bookstagram account, my handle was fantastical romance, because the term romantasy had not really been used then, and I wasn't smart enough to think that one up. So like that is my favorite. And totally agree. We should have it as its own category going forward.
And what about young adult?
Well, I also felt like young adult could be any of these as well. But yeah, no, I'm a huge YA fan as well. Yeah, there's so much crossover, I guess, is the thing between like the ones that you've mentioned, the ones that I came up with. And there's a lot of stories, a lot of books that can have elements of these, but it's just kind of a fun way to, I think, start off the chat and recognize how broad of a genre this really is. And any other ones that I missed?
I was going to say other areas, maybe things like magical realism.
Yeah.
But my other thought was, even just looking at all of this and the other areas we've discussed, it's why I feel like fantasy as a umbrella genre should be so universally popular. Because something like horror, you could put horror under thriller and that would be absolutely accepted. It's a thriller subgenre as much as it is a fantasy subgenre, because it is fantasy, because you can make your own world, you make your own rules, you can bring anything in that you like. And it's just why I feel like it's got such a wide ranging appeal, because you can do whatever you want with it. You know, sci-fi can be a fairy tale retelling, or it could be a space opera, or it could be aliens on a distant planet, or it could just be the Hunger Games set in, a few years in the future or something. It can be a whole different range of things. So like when people say, oh, I don't like fantasy, I'm like, you've just not read the right ones yet, have you?
Yes, exactly. Here, Jenny, I agree.
So the next question I have, it's a little more straightforward, and that is, which fantasy author do you own the most books of? And for this one, why don't we start with Jenny?
So I actually was counting this up earlier to double check, because earlier this month, I accidentally bought all 15 of the Wheel of Time books. So Robert Jordan is up there, as I own a lot of his books. But Sarah J. Maas, I have 17 books of hers, so she's tipped that. I think, and I don't have them here, but I think the winner, the crown, probably goes to Anne McCaffrey, because I think I own all of her books, and I think that's 22. So possibly Anne McCaffrey. Otherwise, I'm going with Sarah J. Maas.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I might as well go next, because mine is also Sarah J. Maas, and I didn't count, but I know that here in London, I have 2 full sets of Throne of Glass plus the Throne of Glass book collector's edition.
That's 24 already.
And that's
That's one series.
Wow.
I mean, nobody ever lets me forget that I pre-ordered like 8 copies of House of Sky and Breath because there were so many different editions. And then also I like lost the receipts for 2 of them. So I reordered them thinking I hadn't reordered them. So they made great gifts. People were very happy. But yeah, I even have in the last year, I got a sprayed edge version of Catwoman Soul Stealer, Sarah J. Maas. And then I also got the graphic novel. And finally, I saw this on Vinted. And it was signed, and I was just kind of, I mean, I can't not. So I do recommend it. I mean, I'm not a superhero like book fan, but I love her writing, and she reeled me in. So yeah, that's me. Moving on, Julianna, how about you?
It's Brandon Sanderson.
Mm.
I recently got on the day after Christmas Barnes & Noble half off sale, I got the boxed set of the Stormlight Archive, which is his like epic fantasy series. And before I had just done ebooks because the paperbacks are like this thick because they're small and then it's like over 1,000 pages. So they're very difficult to read, I feel like, in that tiny thing. But now I have these pretty hardcovers with like big, and it fans out nicely. So for my next reread, I'm going to have...
Yeah, and this is the UK version. So this is The Way of Kings. It's going to be published in 2 books because it's too big to be bound in one.
Yes, it's amazing.
Gorgeous. Yeah. All right, Zuzanna, how about you? Which author do you own the most books of?
Okay, so I'm gonna do 2 categories by ebook or physical books, right? Because in terms of ebook and physical books, I think if I put the 2 of them together, Sarah J. Maas. But for Naomi Novik, I have to say that I own both physical copies and ebook copies of all her books. And because she's written 14 in total, that brings it up to, I guess, 28 because I've got a copy of each. But this is my absolute favorite fantasy series ever, hands down. It's 9 volumes of dragons fighting in Napoleon's Wars. Like, I know that on the face of it, it all sounds very military and all that. It is military fantasy, but it also has some of the most beautiful friendships I've ever read in any kind of genre. So Naomi Novik's Téméraire series is 100%. Like, I recommend this to everybody. What I love about Naomi Novik's writing is like the morality of her characters. They're all, they have these really strong moral values, and they're never righteous about it. It's the epitome of people leading by example, and I love this so much. Definitely recommend those. And then I think also, again, I think counting ebook and physical books, I would say Robin Hobb. So I have the whole Assassin's Apprentice on ebook, The Fitz and the Fool. So I haven't counted, but I think definitely she'd be up there.
Wow. These are some excellent recommendations, and I will be checking all of them out. And also, I love what you said about like the friendship and the element that you really like in Naomi Novik's books, because I think that's another huge draw of fantasy, is that like not only are there great romantasy and romance in fantasy, but also the friendships can be so powerful and, inspiring and heartwarming in fantasy books. Okay, so I think we are going to move on to our game. So I'm very excited about this one. So this is the introduction.